Welcome everybody. Well, I'm so glad you're here. So let's roll up our sleeves and dig in. Working memory is such a fundamental part of living with ADHD. Many people with ADHD struggle with both working memory issues and or processing speed issues. And the working memory as well as processing speed are both factors which load onto your general cognition evaluation with something called the WISC or the WACE, as well as and the Woodcock-Johnson. So these are ways that when you have a psychological evaluation to figure out if your child has ADHD or you might have ADHD, this is something that you'll find out. So first of all, I would like to say that I am running a parenting group. It starts on Monday. It's called Thriving with ADHD, and it's for parents just like you. And I'm putting the link right here. If you're interested in joining, I encourage you to join. I'm not sure that link went through. Attitude, if you could put a link from my website up for people to check it out, that would be great. This is going to be a small group, so you'll have a chance to talk about some of the issues that you're dealing with, as well as get the entire group's support. I've run these before and they're really wonderful. Parents who have kids with ADHD and parents who have ADHD, but generally it's for parents who have kids with ADHD. But if you want to join as a parent who has it, you're welcome to, because I think all the things will be relatable for you. Okay, so let's talk about working memory. So working memory is an essential aspect of executive functioning, and it's challenging for many kids and adults with ADHD. It allows us to hold several things in our thoughts at once and do something with them. It's fundamentally linked also to emotional control. When we perceive a thought, a behavior, or we engage in an action or an activity, and we see that as important and meaningful, it tends to get transferred into longer term memory more readily than things that we don't find that interesting or important. If I told you my phone number and you were interested in calling me, you'd probably remember that a little bit easier than you would if you weren't interested in calling me, for example. This is how we draw on past experiences and apply ideas and solutions to our current or future situations. Without working memory, people probably can't recall things from even a few moments ago. It's really important to understand that working memory challenges, along with processing speed issues, can be a natural part of living with ADHD. They don't cause ADHD, they come with it. Unfortunately, there are several strategies that kids and adults with ADHD can use to improve their working memory. So let's start with the three types of memory that exist. So there's short-term memory, which is super quick. It stores information briefly, just long enough to use that retained information and then quickly forget it, like a temporary verification code. Working memory allows us to process information without losing track of other tasks we're performing. It's like the computational space in your brain. So for example, if I said to you, my phone number, which is, my work phone number is 413-586-6900, and then I asked you to repeat it back to me, that would be more straightforward memory. But then if I asked you to repeat it back to me backwards, that would use your working memory, because you have to hold it in your brain and perform an action with it. And maybe you close your eyes and you see the numbers, and that's how you can do it. Or maybe you write them out in your head, or you write them in the air. You have a method of retaining information. It's related to short-term memory, but it lasts longer, and it involves that manipulation of information. So I tell you my phone number, and then I ask you to repeat it to me backwards. Working memory allows us to retain someone's name throughout a conversation, and what it really does is help follow a set of directions. You may say to your kid, I want you to use the bathroom, get your backpack, and meet me in the car, and your child may only get as far as the bathroom because they don't remember the other steps in the sequence. The third type of memory is long-term memory, and this involves the storage and recall of information over a long period of time, days, weeks, years. Your childhood memories, favorite songs, faces of loved ones are all processed through long-term memory. So let me just check in the chat for a minute and see what people are saying. Shauna, you have both. Please join. We'd love to have you. Mindy says, I should say outside of school tasks, home tasks, and basic life skills are very hard to remember. His neuropsych is helpful with some strategies for managing frustration, but it never really helps his actual memory. So one of the challenges with improving working memory is that it's a cool executive functioning skill. So executive functioning skills are hot, like things we're conscious of, planning, prioritizing, organizing, how we're controlling our emotions, setting a goal, initiating something. Those really respond well to direct instruction. The cooler executive functioning skills like sustained attention or working memory or being able to return to a task after you've been interrupted, those are harder to teach because they're less conscious. They're not necessarily in your awareness. And so working memory falls into that category. So focus falls into that category. People aren't necessarily aware of when they're not focused because they've drifted off, but they're aware when they come back from the drift and they're like, oops, I lost my focus. So these are things that take time, and they also take maturation. So the kids' brains develop. Our brains really kind of are learning and growing. They reach their full size and volume by the age of 10. But in terms of the pathways in our brains, those continue throughout our lives, and the executive functioning skills really coalesce in neurotypical brains around age 25, and in neurodivergent brains with ADHD about a 3-year delay. Let me just go back because there were a couple questions here. Yes, you can watch this at a later time. You need to make a binder full of how-tos when it comes to self-care laundry. So Teresa, this is actually a really good point, because what we're going to talk about later is how do you cue kids for working memory, because what happens in a lot of families is that the parent or the caregiver becomes a human reminder machine. And that's a really unpleasant position for the adult, but it's also unpleasant for the child because the child pushes back a lot. Don't tell me, I don't want to hear it, blah, 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 blah. So having lists and binders and things that are actual visual cues to help kids go through the steps of something over time with repetition, those steps become ingrained in our brains. So let's talk a little bit about working memory and ADHD. Now, kids and adults with working memory kids and adults with ADHD often experience working memory challenges, which contribute to their challenges with executive functioning skills and, of course, emotional control, because working memory and emotional control are inherently linked. Remember, I said if something seems important or valuable or rewarding, you'll hold on to that and recall it. It's the same. It also flips on in a different way. That if you're in a situation and you need to manage yourself, you may not remember how you did it last time in a similar situation to apply to this current one. And so that the people with stronger working memory have been found through research to basically exert better emotional control. So these issues can manifest and become problematic if you need to commit something to memory and act upon that information and you struggle with how, or if you're overwhelmed by big feelings and stimulation in a social situation, you might say or do something impulsively without recalling what you previously did that worked. So let's say, for example, that your child's teacher asks them to collect their classmates' journals, alphabetize them by last name, and place them on top of his desk. By the time your child has gathered the journals, they may have forgotten the next step or vaguely remember they're supposed to do something else, but can't remember what or how to sort the journals. They know they're supposed to do something, but what is that? And then with this roadblock, they can't complete the task without getting help. And a lot of times what kicks in is shame. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to ask for help. I'm afraid that people will notice that I didn't remember, and that's uncomfortable for me. So a similar situation could arise at work for the adults too. Perhaps you're asked to summarize a meeting as it wraps up, but you stumble with recalling and articulating what's occurred. When things are flagged as emotionally important, they transfer down the memory line and are converted into long-term memories much more readily. This doesn't mean that when something's not emotionally important, you can't remember it. It's just going to be harder. And that has to do with lower amounts of dopamine, the neurotransmitter in our brain that we find in people with ADHD. Because dopamine is related to pleasure and reward, as well as, motivation. So this is why emotions and working memory are so intricately linked. Short-term, immediate memory for simple tasks gets processed first. Information that's more complex and demanding goes into the working memory, and then if it's tagged as emotionally important or relevant, it lands in long-term memory. It's a complicated process. And I don't know if any of you remember the movie Inside Out, but in that movie, the girl goes up into her brain and there's someone who's like managing her memories. And at one point that person says, oh, we don't remember how to play, Ode to Joy by, we don't need to know that. Chopsticks is good enough. And she tosses the memory of how to play Ode to Joy. And there's a kind of, I thought that was brilliant, sort of concretization of what actually happens in our brains. So how are we going to improve working memory? So the first thing that we're going to do is with repetition. So repetition is an effective way to improve working memory. It helps to pair an action or a movement with a word or a phrase. I once had a client who needed to learn some Spanish vocabulary, so he created a special movement for each word to help him remember it. If you're learning lines for a play or memorizing a presentation, you can improve your retention by reading and practicing right before you go to bed and the first thing when you wake up. There are fewer distractions or interruptions on either side of sleep, so you'll have a better chance of remembering things. If you are giving instructions to a child or teen with ADHD who struggles with working memory, I'd like you to use my rule of 3. And I talk about this in my book and on my website. But here it is. Number 1, you're going to make eye contact. For kids who are uncomfortable looking at the face, because the face has a lot of information and there's a lot going on, you can have them look right here. So they look here or here. And then you state the direction, one direction. And then you ask them to repeat the direction back to you, not once, but twice. Once is that short-term memory. Twice is that working memory, and it adds value to it, so it can be transferred to something that holds a little bit longer. So they say it once, automatic. They say it twice, they have to think about it, and there's a better chance that it'll stick. The first time that you do this, your kids will be like, I'm not going to tell you what you just said to me, particularly if you have teens who are kind of all about, showing you their colors. What you might want to do is to say, you know what, we're using this as an experiment this week. This week, I'm going to repeat something to you. I'm going to tell you something. You're going to repeat it. I'm going to repeat it to me, not once, but twice. And we're going to see if your retention improves. Another way to improve working memory is with routines. Routines in tandem with repetition can improve performance as well. Creating routines is another form of repetition which can help with working memory. If you repeat the same set of tasks consistently, you will be less likely to forget one or more of those tasks or related details. That's why morning and evening routines help kids stay focused and oriented to what's needed. All right, so let's see what we have for comments and questions. There seems to be a lot going on here, so that's fantastic. Let's see. I feel okay. I don't see a way to share the video right now. You can share it. You can't share the video now, but you can share it later. Courtney, my issue is he thinks it's my memory that's bad and blows up even though it's his. I have witnesses because I was concerned it was maybe me. Right, so what happens with a lot of kids who struggle in the ways that kids with ADHD struggle is there's a kind of a shame shield, right? And this shame shield is a deflector. So instead of acknowledging that the problem is with them, because they don't want to have a problem, they want to be just like everybody else, they're going to basically blame you for the problem because A, they can't hold it, it's too painful, and B, if they export it onto you, then they don't have to hold it, and they can continue on, perhaps with the, false belief that it's not really their problem. One thing that I want you to think about is that a lot of kids with ADHD feel like they can never get things right. It's never enough. I don't do this well enough. I don't do that well enough. They may hide that under a bravado, but underneath, believe me, your kids are engaging in compare and despair. They are comparing themselves left and right with what other kids are doing and wondering why they're not able to do that as well. I think that for kids who struggle with working memory, we want to talk about creating systems for routines and reminders where you are not the locus of the reminders, that they're external, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Thank you, Elaine, for saying that. I've done a lot with executive functioning, and in school we expect a lot early on, just as you indicated. Yep. There becomes a lot of negativity in the family dynamic. That's right, because you've become the one who's holding the container for all of the instructions, and your kids are angry at you. They don't want to be reminded or told what to do. And there's a kind of, for some kids, it's overwhelming. There's a flooding. And for older kids, for teenagers in particular, who are trying to separate themselves from you, they don't want you to tell them what to do. They want to believe that they're autonomous and they can remember it all themselves, even though they can't. So Deborah says, over time, we've tried for years. Right. And so what happens is you'll try for years, but you're trying in lots of different areas, and you might want to just focus on one area of the routine. Just keep doing the routines, because eventually they're going to sink in. I had a client who once told me, she was maybe about 17, and she said that her father was always saying to her, look at the trail you're leaving behind you. Turn around and look behind you and see what's there, and then you'll know what you need to pick up and clean up. And this was very frustrating for her, and she would always say, oh, stop telling me about the trail, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. And then she came into session one day and she said, Dr. Sharon, something very strange happened. And I was like, okay, what happened? She said, well, I was babysitting for this family on Saturday, and their kids were pretty messy, and we had to clean up. And I told them, it just came out of my mouth, turn around and look at the trail behind you. And she was like, we started laughing so hard because it's like, it sunk in, and oh my God, I'm becoming my father. So it was really very funny. But there are little phrases that you say that actually go in there. They may not do them, but they're there. And it's hard for you to know what those are. But I encourage you to really continue trying. Courtney, I don't know age, but I taught my kids laundry by using a Sharpie on the machine and labeled it in order of steps and then where to set it. That's brilliant, okay? Because then it's right there. So kids with ADHD really benefit from visual cues. And let's move on to that for a second. I'm going to talk a little bit about reminders. I just want to turn my heater on because it got very cold in this room. Hold on. Thank you. So sorry. I live in Massachusetts, and there's a strange kind of brisk wind today, and I was feeling very chilled. So thank you for your patience. Now there is a difference between giving a cue and being a reminder machine. In the first case, you alert your child or teen or yourself to something that needs to occur. In the second case, you're telling kids what to do so they don't develop those skills or agency. So for example, instead of telling them for the millionth time to put their dishes in the sink after breakfast and grab their backpack, refer them to the list of activities for the morning routine on the refrigerator. You can also do this for yourself with useful apps where you record your have-tos, set alarms or alerts to remind you, and then cross things off the list if you want. I've been using this great app called, hold on, To Do. It's by Microsoft Word, I think. And yep, and I love it because you can set different lists. So I have a home list and a work list, and then when you check it, it draws a line through it and moves it away from the list. So this can be a helpful thing. It doesn't alert me that it's due. That's a separate thing that I have to do on my calendar. Like, I have Facebook Live today at 4, at 3:45, my alert went off, get ready. But these kinds of things can help you. For me, I like to cross things off my list. So this app is really helpful for me. And instead of having like 14 pieces of paper, which I inevitably will lose. So you want to take advantages of checklists, alarms, to-do lists, and any kinds of reminders to jog the memory in case people lose focus. And this will ensure everybody that is able to complete a process or a set of instructions independently. It also helps kids learn to prioritize and organize because the things are there for them and they see, oh, this is what I do first. Then I do this thing. Or maybe today I do this thing and then I do that thing, but I'm doing the things that are on the list. And you can also incentivize your kids, if you get these things done, then and there's no arguing, you can earn extra 15 minutes of screen time later or something that matters to them. An extra game with you, or maybe a special trip to the grocery store where they can pick out something they like. So reminders, cues are very helpful because they decrease overwhelm and they build self-esteem. And when you help your kids develop the resources that they need or that you need, things run more smoothly and people feel a sense of success. Now, let's see. What can I do to support my child in class when she struggles to take notes because she says the teacher talks too fast? Well, Michelle, actually, probably she needs either a 504 or an IEP. I don't know where you live, but in the United States, those are accommodation plans. And she probably can't take the notes and listen at the same time. And so she shouldn't have to. That there should be someone in the class who's taking notes for her. This happens a lot in high school. Or the teacher can give a copy of the lesson so that she can just listen and follow along. That would be more helpful. Accommodations can include note takers. Exactly, Layla. Okay, thank you, Jessica, for saying that. Yeah. Your kids love that movie. Excellent. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, so many comments. I lost my place. Hold on. Where can we find your book? Thank you for asking, Susie. You can get it on barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com or to your local independent bookstore. They'd be happy to order it, or if they don't have it. So what about keeping track of long-term projects? Is that a working memory issue? For example, my daughter has a number of extracurricular activities that require some additional studying activities. So she's in a club that requires some aerospace education and knowledge tests. This requires that she keep track of what materials to study. I'm struggling to find a way to keep her to help her. Okay, she's convinced that planners don't work. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kids who won't use planners. So kids who won't use planners are showing us that the planners that they've been given don't work for how their brain works. So we want to talk to them about what kind of planner works for their brain. They might do well with just a calendar. This is just a plain old binder that I got from Staples. And you can see that it has like the calendar for the month, but then afterwards, what I like about it is it has big things for the week. So every day is a week. So I'm looking at a week at a time. And for some people, that's too much. They might need to look at just a day at a time. But if they're not willing to use a planner, then they're telling you that the planners don't work, or they feel like a failure because they have to use them. When in reality, the most successful neurotypical people all use planners, Google calendars, whatever. So we want to help her. We also want to help create a system of organization that makes sense to her brain. Like, where do these papers go? Where does this information go? Whether that's online or in a binder, that's helpful. Colors, alphabetical, numbers. What's going to make sense to her? What's the order of that going to be? Story of my life. I want to help my son develop routines, but it's so hard to remember myself. Of course, I need a simple system to cue us both that works. He won't even brush his teeth in the morning. Right, and so I'm glad you brought this up, that it's hard if you yourself are neurodivergent to help your kids learn skills that are challenging for you. So I think what can help is doing certain things together. So if he won't brush his teeth in the morning after breakfast, let him brush his teeth with you in the morning before you go downstairs. If he can, if you can link brushing your teeth to earning a privilege, that might make a difference. Like maybe if he brushes his teeth, he could sit in the front seat if he's big enough and old enough, or he can pick the music that you listen to, or something like that. But the simpler the system, the better it is for both of you. You're absolutely right. And so I would start with, what works for you. Because if it works for you, then you're going to be modeling how it could work for him. My 16-year-old refuses to take notes or keep an agenda, yet he complains he doesn't know how to study, even though he's smart and knows the information is not conveyed on tests. I'm getting nothing but pushback from the school in trying to get him SPED and individualized instructions. What are some easy 504 accommodations I could request from the school since they refuse to give him an IEP? So I'm curious about why they're refusing to give him an IEP, Stephanie. It seems like when kids are refusing, when kids are oppositional, they have a belief about themselves or about the task that they have to do that usually is connected to a negative expectation and a core sense of deficiency. So he's smart, but he can't apply his intelligence in the way that he would like, and so he feels bad about himself. This happens for a lot of kids who are both twice exceptional, or smart kids with ADHD. They know that they understand and comprehend, but they can't integrate and apply it. And so if they're getting pushed, if they won't give him individualized instruction, he needs to have obviously sit in the front of the class, perhaps have a note taker, make sure that he has a time alone with the teacher to go over areas that he's unsure about. He may not know how to study. He may feel overwhelmed by studying, so it would be helpful to sit down with the teacher and say, okay, what would help me study? It might be useful to get him a tutor who can assist him with learning basic study skills that make sense for his uniquely wired brain. I'll consider using timer phone app, something they'll use and check. Yes. Autonomous. Okay, but he won't use lists or planners, so of course I have to tell him what to do, or I tell him to look at the list I wrote. So, a lot of kids will not create their own lists because that's their little pushback, rebellion, or they don't believe they're going to work. So autonomy is something that I think is a myth anyway for these kids for quite a long time. Instead, what we're aiming for is connected independence, so where they still are engaging with you in some way. So you're going to help make a list until he's ready to make the list with you, or you're going to collaborate with him on making the list, which would be my first choice. Again, not wanting to use planners is a sign that they haven't found one that works for them, or they're holding out for a memory system that's going to emerge someday miraculously in their brain, instead of seeing planners as tools that everybody uses, whether you're neurodivergent or not. And so we need to normalize planners, because I'm sure that other people in the school use planners of some kind. They have some way to keep track of things. So if he doesn't want to use a planner, that's fine. What is he going to use instead to keep track of things? And do you need to like print out, a bunch of forms that you can find online, task, here's the to-do task, here's the due date, here's what I need to do that task. I have a form like that in my book if you want to check it out. My girls' phones are turned off using screen time until they finish their chores in the morning. Great. It's a reminder to them without me telling them that they need to get certain things to get their phones back. It's helpful, especially with my 14-year-old, to remember to take her medication without me hounding her every day. Another thing that you can do is to create a little list of what needs to go in the backpack, laminate it, pin it to the back of the backpack, so when they open their backpack, they're like, oh, here's what needs to go in here in the morning, and oh, here's what needs to go in here in the afternoon. And that way they can keep track of things rather than trying to rely on their memory system. Rafaela, when I say ADHD, I'm talking about both hyperactive impulsive ADHD and inattentive ADHD, which was formerly known as ADD. So yes, thank you. Sharpie on the machine. I did that on my dryer too. I also wrote out daily room chores in Sharpie markers on his bedroom wall. Good for you, because let me tell you, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy is not coming to your house. So if you need to write it on the wall or write it on the on the washer or dryer, go for it. Okay, so someone says, our Alexa Dot yells out regular alarm notifications. Thank you, Teresa, for saying that. Alexa can be very helpful if you can afford one, and your kid, for kids who have ADHD, because it will remind you automatically about what needs to be done. I've known a lot of families for whom that's quite useful. A smart speaker in your kids' room can be very, very helpful. Examples work better than reminders. Yes, examples do work, and when you are doing things that are modeling how you keep track of things, your child's watching. They may not acknowledge it for a while, but they're watching. Remember my client who said, look behind you at the trail you're leaving. It sinks in. It may take a longer time than you'd like, but stuff sinks in. So we want to break things down. Many folks with ADHD struggle to remember complicated tasks. The fewer things you have to remember, the more likely you'll be to remember them. So break down large projects or chores or lists into smaller parts to reduce the scope of what's in front of you or them. When people work on one thing at a time, they reduce the brain fatigue that comes with multitasking, and they are able to maintain concentration more easily. Then it's more possible to get things done and see progress being made. So one of the best ways that we can improve working memory is to accept the brain that you have. So it's important to understand that ADHD brains are unique, not broken or bad. If you or your child experience issues with working memory, focus on equipping yourself with the effective tools and strategies to improve your own memory. instead of paying attention or putting yourself down with, under the breath comments that are critical and talking about your deficiencies. When your child or teen says, I have a bad memory, how can you reframe that? What could you say instead of, yep, that's true, or, we all struggle with memory in this family? What could you say when your child says, I have a bad memory? How could you flip that on its head so that they're not, thinking about themselves as bad or good in that black or white thinking? Please put that in the chat. Let's see what some of you might be saying. Lower amounts of dopamine and norepinephrine, which is the other neurotransmitter that's often involved with ADHD, which has to do with sleep, concentration, alertness, focus, can explain some aspect of working memory struggles. Describe what working memory is to your kids, your partners, your friends, your colleagues. Watch the movie Inside Out a little bit one more time. And talk about working memory as a search engine of the brain whose wires need some tweaking, okay? And those adjustments come in the forms of reminders, alerts, alarms, and yes, planners. Normalize forgetfulness as something that happens to all people, and share your own tools for recalling tasks. Show them, not necessarily tell them. You can tell them and they may or may not listen, but if you show them, they're going to observe how you're managing to remember things. One of the things that I do that helps me is that if someone says, oh, we're going to have a meeting at such and such a time, I'll go right into my calendar and I put it in. Otherwise, I may not remember it. If I'm on the phone with the dentist trying to schedule an appointment, I absolutely put them on speaker so that I can look at my calendar and make sure I put in the dentist appointment, or I will forget. I won't recall it. So, it's okay to use these tools. And I have found, honestly, as I've gotten older, I need some more tools than I used to, because I get a little more easily overwhelmed, and I'm very bad because I do a lot of multitasking, which doesn't help my brain. Solo tasking or even dual tasking is better than having 7 screens up at the same time. 7 tabs up on your screen at the same time, and you're switching back and forth. It's exhausting for your brain. Be playful. Maybe create fun acronyms or associations to jog the memory circuitry. Kids might like that. I remember sometimes a little trick that I've used and used with kids to remember things is your hand. So the thumb is attached to, going to the grocery store. The next finger is making sure I buy milk. The next finger might be buying a cooked chicken. So I'm going to the grocery store, I'm getting milk, the cooked chicken, etc. I do it that way. That can be helpful. So let's go to our questions and comments. Oh my goodness, there are 24. My son has a hard time getting out of bed in the morning and sometimes having a struggle staying in his classroom. He can do a week okay, and then another one off task. So, the thing is, if your child struggles with these things and has a week, then at the end, maybe he could earn something at the end of that week as a reward for being able to follow through. Maybe a few points at the end of each day. I had a client, there's a grocery store here, and they give out wooden or plastic coins that are points, so eventually you can get some money off your groceries. And so his mom just would give him the little coins that he would earn when he would do things that he needed to do. And he was in 2nd grade, and so he didn't care what the coins were for. He's like, I have 10 coins, I'm great. And so we want to kind of play a little bit with that. And then to expect that, 1 week he was really focused and able to do it, he was on his game, and the next week he might struggle a little bit more. That's okay. That's how we learn. Remember, it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still forward motion. Okay. Thank you, Layla and Georgia, to come for yourselves as well. You're welcome, Mary. Let's see, I forgot to add, oh my goodness, I forgot to add your free downloadable. So I'm going to put that in right now. I hope that this works. Here it is right here. This is your gift from me about motivating your kids to get things done. You can just cut and paste it into your browser, and you'll be able to get that. So thank you. That's a gift. And of course, if you want to join my group, I'd love to have you. So let me go back to comments because there are so many of them. I've printed out many types of cute to-do lists he refuses. Right. So let him make it himself. Let him make it himself. Cute is not going to work for him. He doesn't want to do it. He might be someone who needs Post-its. He might be someone who just needs a row of Post-its. That might work for him. We want to think outside of the box. What do you do when a child does not relate to a specific teacher, and because she and this teacher do not work well together, she's failing the class? She gets A's in all her other classes in 7th grader. So in those cases, I would absolutely call a meeting with the teacher, with your child, and some person of authority in the school. Because they need to figure out why they're not getting along. So you can have a meeting first with the teacher and the authority person at the school, and then you can bring your child in, because your child has to participate. What is it that the child doesn't like about the teacher or the teacher's doing that's not working, and what could the teacher be willing to do differently? So those probably are 2 separate meetings, one with adults only, one with your child involved as well. Because if she's getting A's in other classes, it's not a question of her capability. It's a question of somehow how the teacher is teaching, and what's hard about that for your child, and can there be any shifts or changes in the mode of instruction that would work better. Maybe your child feels like that teacher doesn't like them, and that's really hard and discouraging. Julia, he's in 5th grade now, and I'm very concerned about him being overwhelmed in 6th grade, transitioning to more teachers and classes. Understandable. So he needs a plan then. So what's going to help him transition from class to class? What are the reminders going to be about what he needs? Maybe there's a list on his desk. Maybe it's in his notebook. He's going to need extra cueing, and he'll need a little extra time as well. So let's make sure that's in the plan for him. Planners, Google syncs. Google Classroom syncs with Google Calendar. Yep, so my kids are using that. Then they only need to add what is not in the Google Classroom. Now getting them to bring home the stuff to do homework is a different issue. Right, so I think that's really what's great about Google Classroom, is that it can sync with the calendar so they can see what they need to do if all the teachers are using it. But if all the teachers aren't using it, then you're kind of stuck in the same situation. Sometimes it's helpful for kids, if they have a phone, to take a picture of what's up on the board for homework. I've had kids who are allowed to have a device like an iPad or a computer in the classroom to take notes or write on the computer, and then those things get translated into typewritten notes to take pictures of things as well. They may need an extra cue from the teacher about what to take home. Let's see. Writing on mirrors with colored pens is helpful. Yes, and you can also get a chalkboard and write with chalk. You can have those bulletin boards where the white erase boards, but they also come in colors and cool backgrounds, so that's kind of fun too. My son had a Google Classroom in 1st grade. It did not work very well. Yeah, he's kind of young. 1st grade is young to use Google Classroom. And for kids in elementary school, I find the pictures of what they need to do to be very helpful, or the teachers writing, helping them write it down, or handing out the assignments can be useful. Okay. We had to remove Alexa for our 13-year-old. She'd listen to music all night and wouldn't remember to use it as the reminding tool. That can happen, I'm sorry to say. But you could maybe put Alexa in during the day and remove it yourself at night, or not if that's too hard for her. Most ADHDers are actually combined type. There are 3 presentations, and yes, that's true. Often what we see in younger kids is hyperactive impulsive type, which will transition more to combination type or to inattentive type. Inattentive type in childhood sort of remains that way throughout adulthood. Okay, my concern is also on Concerta and 5th and 6th grade. It was getting memory and emotions, now doing in 8th grade, tried multiple stimulants, and I feel like emotional reactions are so intense. What can we do to get them through puberty? Hang on. Tell them you love them. Let them know that this is tough. Their brain is a chemical soup right now, and stimulants may or may not work. Non-stimulants might work. A combination of things can be useful. Pills don't teach skills, so of course we still need to have tools and resources to give our kids. I think it's really important that if you're trying a number of stimulants and they didn't work, that you're actually working with a good child prescriber, someone who knows kids, not just a pediatrician, because a specialist can be useful. Jessica, my brain absorbs small amounts of information in an effort not to get overwhelmed. Great. This has been great. My son has working memory processing issues and retaining information. I'm so glad, Len. When I was really depressed, I had a list that included go pee, eat. Christine, thank you so much for sharing that. That is really courageous and brave. And what I love about it is the simplicity. When you're depressed, it's like, have I used the bathroom? Have I had a glass of water? Did I eat today? Did I actually step outside of my house? So I really appreciate your courage in sharing that. Thank you. You have router ability to kill Wi-Fi, so after bedtime, Wi-Fi is off for the house because he kept finding new loopholes. So that happens for a lot of kids, yes. I think mindfulness is great for ADHD across the board. It can really help with managing anxiety. It is not as useful for as a tool for building for managing social anxiety, because you can still be overly wrapped up in yourself rather than in the present moment about what's going on with you. But in general, I'm a big fan of mindfulness and practice it myself and share it with others. Thanks for posting those articles on 2E Kids, Annie. Jessica, my computer has so many tabs open, I can only imagine how many tabs are open in my brain. LOL. Agreed. I overwhelm myself with too many to-dos on my list. So what happens when you do that is you need to do a brain dump of the list, and then you need to look at the list and say, okay, what are the dates by which these things need to be done? Put those down, and then take the most pressing items and move them to another list so you can get those done, and then you can do the same thing with the next 4 or 5 items, so you're not overwhelmed and you have a smaller sort of a pond to look at instead of one of the Great Lakes. This helped. I could say at least I ate something or peed. Yes. We talk about the ADHD superpower to notice everything all at once and notice things others don't. But with it comes difficulties of having to concentrate twice as much for ordinary tasks. Absolutely. So it is time for us to stop. I want to make sure that you check out the downloadable that I've given you. That attitude posted. I see so many great comments. I'm going to try to respond to some of them. Layla lists help for you. Quit talking, you're embarrassing yourself. Interesting. Using a visual chart, that's really helpful. Re-rolls, fingerprints, fed time, I don't understand. Love this idea. We have a weekly chart, but my child gets so distressed when it's not full at the end of the week. So your idea would be progress, as he would see, yes, he would see progress, not negative spaces. Absolutely. Dry erase markers on sliding glass doors do work. There is no wrong way, exactly. So there are ways that are effective and there are ways that are less effective. But kids will tell themselves, and we adults tell ourselves, there's a right way and a wrong way. And that kind of thinking is very unhelpful. Okay. You can contact me through my website, www.drsharonsaline.com. I'll put that in the comment. Okay. Laminate a sheet with pictures and arrows for bath time. Great. You disconnected Siri because your son was asking for answers to math. That is somewhat funny, but not. And of course, with ChatGPT, it's a whole nother area we've got to deal with. What kinds of things do you use as activities or prizes? I was thinking of doing something like that, but couldn't make these decisions. So I would sit down with your kid and ask them, what would you like to earn? What would be fun for you? Let's list, doing a puzzle, playing a game, watching a special TV show every night, going out for, a slice of pizza. What kinds of things are fun for them that they would see as a reward? You don't have to figure this out yourself. Talk with them and then, make a list of them. Okay. Let's see. Angie, I'm going to end with this. This is so great. I found that being sure to compliment my daughter when she's remembered something or done something without being reminded really helps her to continue that positive behavior. That's my 5th C, celebration. You've got to validate, notice, comment, let them know that you see that they're trying, that they're efforting, that they're making progress. I lost it. Okay. She's so used to hearing and feeling negative things that the positive comments really stick with her. Absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that. And finally, the last thing I want to say is, Jennifer, about kids losing interest in charts and rewards. So the charts might be too difficult, too complicated, and have too many steps. So I would keep them really simple and then change up what the quote-unquote reward or incentive is, because kids with ADHD get bored. So this week it'll be this, next week it'll be that, the following week we can go back to the first thing, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you'll be able to check out my downloadable, and if you're interested in joining me for my parenting group, I have a few slots left, so get on that right away because it starts on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend, not Easter weekend, and I look forward to seeing all of you very soon. Thanks. Bye.